The next episode in my life that I'd like to talk about is my years at college. The first college. I've been to college. I have 2 college degrees, and I applied basically to 3 colleges in high school. Senior year, I applied to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, which is in Troy, New York, and I applied to Princeton University, and I applied to Yale University. I didn't apply to Harvard because I felt I couldn't get in, and may have been untrue. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I could have gotten in, but I wanted to apply to schools that I just personally had a feeling that I definitely could get into. So I was accepted at all 3, and well, for good reason, I think, because not only was I 5th in my class, as I had mentioned in the previous episode, and had good extracurricular activities, but I also had good test scores. I had on the SAT, I had a 800 in math, which is perfect, and I took the test twice, and both times I got more than 1,500 on the combined math and verbal of the aptitude test. So both averaged over 750 for the math and verbal tests. So I had a good record, and I got in. So a mystery of my life, though, was one day my father walked in before I got into before I heard from the schools. My father walked in after work one day, and he was kind of in an odd mood, a kind of angry mood, and he said to me, "Jim, you're not going to get into Yale because I'm a businessman." Now, I don't know why he thought that, but and actually I don't know if he believes it. Maybe he was playing some tricks in my head or something. I don't know what. It was odd, but I did get into Yale. I don't know why he thought I wouldn't get into Yale. And so I was really I was motivated. I really I looked forward to it. And when I heard on the phone from from somebody that official word that I was going to be accepted, I went out to the back door, and I stuck my head out the door, and I screamed Yahoo, because I was really excited. So, and then when I heard the announcement that they were accepting girls for the first time at Yale, my first year there, I went really berserk, because I was very anxious to meet some really nice girls. So I went to school, went off to Yale, and freshman year was just a real joy. I did a lot of different things. I was excited about courses. I looked over that book with all the courses that you could take, and I was so thrilled by. I test. The first couple of weeks you have a grace period to try certain courses out, see if you like them. So I went to all kinds of different courses, art courses, and they had sensitivity training courses. That was they were. I was interested in those too, and I tried a few courses, and I decided I wanted to take a math course, not the usual course. Usually you take calculus, but I wanted to take an advanced course because I was qualified, because I took the AP tests, and I got a 4 out of 5 possible, and so I was eligible to take an advanced math course. And I went into the office of the person in charge, the faculty member, for approving such a thing, and I told him I wanted to take this advanced course and not the normal calculus. And he said, "Well, are you sure? Because you're signing away your math life here. You're not going to be able to get back on track if you do this." And I said, "I'm sure. I want to do this." So I took linear algebra, math 22A, and it was a real great course. I enjoyed it a lot. I learned a lot about that type of math, and I wasn't sorry. I got what amounts to a B. They had an odd grading system there the first year or two. It was pass, high pass, honors, and fail. So I got a high pass, which was, I guess, a B. And I took economics, I took history of art, and I took, what else did I take? There's a few courses I can't remember right now, but anyway, I took a lot of courses, did fairly well. I got an honors I got in I had a college seminar, they called them. It was an art course called the Design Continuum with Roger Eberly as the teacher. He was an artist. He was not a regular Yale faculty member. He was an artist. He had a master's degree, so he could teach in college, and he did work with sails. I understand he did massive sculptures with sails from boats. And he was interesting, and I took it for a full year. I got an honors the first year and a high pass the second year. So he liked my work first year, very definitely, and it was interesting. You collected garbage off the street. You went around the street, and you know, anywhere you went, you collected artifacts, and you put them into a portfolio. So I did it pretty well. And also that year, they in that class, I was exposed for the first time to drugs. The class amazingly had took out a little cashish, put it on a tin can, and lit it up, and they all smoked. I didn't smoke. I wasn't interested, and at that time anyway. And that was an eye-opener to see how people's attitudes towards drugs was very very knowledgeable. They all seemed to know what they were doing. So apparently people in college are more experienced. I don't know, but I didn't do it. And then I went later in the senior year. Freshman year. I went to on a trip to New York. First, I went on a trip to Connecticut with the Mountaineering Club, and we went to this rather minor outcrop of rock somewhere, and we went climbing, and I learned a lot about climbing, and I was so excited by the whole thing, I decided to go on another trip, on a more advanced trip. So we went to New York State. There was a mountain range called the Shawangunk Mountains, and for this trip they advised me to get some regular shoes. They have shoes designed for climbing, rock climbing. So I went and bought those shoes, and they told me when I bought them that you buy them at a size shoe that's 2 or 3 sizes smaller than your shoe size, and this was to get your feet plowed up into the front of the shoe so that you get good feel, so that, to increase the sensitivity of your feet. And this was these shoes fit very tightly. I was very uncomfortable, but I bought them. So we went climbing, and we got there, and there was this long approach. It was quite a distance to the mountains, but you could see the mountains in the distance jutting up out of the land. They were just this massive, just like, of course it was summertime, or springtime, so there was no snow, but there was this outcropping of rock, of this huge, like 200 or 300 feet. I don't know how tall it was, but it was an enormous, just jutting out of the land. So we climbed. We went over all these pebbles and boulders and things that were all strewn all over the land to get to the mountain. And we finally got there. And I went up with a couple of other climbers, and we were tied together by a rope. And they explained how the knots worked. And I was in the middle because you want the inexperienced climber. They were experienced climbers. They wanted the inexperienced climber to be in the middle so that they could hold the rope so they're not going to fall. And it was a vertical climb. We went up vertically for like 200 or 300 feet, and this was just unbelievable. Oh my God! And we started climbing, and you climb one person at a time because everybody else has got to be careful of what happens if he falls. You got to be ready. So we went up, and there was just one part of the climb where you didn't go up, you went to the side because it was you needed to change pathways to get to a particular other part of the rocks, and it was a vertical face that you climbed across because there was a ledge of about at the most 2 inches. At the most 2 inches, and this is a vertical face of rock, and your hands have to, that's where your foot, the ledge is where you put your feet, and you move your feet across, and the ledge went all the way across, but and then your hands, they're just little indentations in the rock, a little bit of a ledge, a little bit of an outcropping of the rock, just a little bit of a mound there, little mounds as you went, And man, I don't know how I did it. I got across, but actually halfway across, I started to lose my handhold. My feet were good. My feet held pretty well, but my hands started to go away from the rock. So I didn't know what was going to happen. I thought they were going to let me fall because I thought that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to let you fall and you'll learn the experience of what it's like. So, but they didn't. They pulled me back in with the rope. So I've been told later on a climbing site on the net that's proper, that they should have done that, and that's the whole point of climbing is how you have your spotters on both sides, and they pull you back in if you get into trouble. You don't want to fall. I was told that climbing, you want to fall regularly. That if you're not falling regularly, you're not climbing up to your ability. So it's a controversial issue to me, I think. So anyway, the rest, I don't know whether they held me there or held me with the rope the rest of the traverse, they called it, where you go across, or whether I was able to go the rest of the way on my own. I don't recall, but I just remember getting all the way across, and it was perilous. It was really perilous. The fall would have been very difficult to I don't know, I might have been hurt, but I made it across. Then the rest of the way up the climb, there was the rock went out over your head and then back in. So you had to use your, I don't know how I did this, and I don't know how anybody does it, but you do it. And of course, if you see Tom Cruise in his Mission one of his Mission Impossible movies, I think it's number 3. He's a great climber. He's a great climber, and he showed him. He did his own stunt for the movie, and you could see him holding on to the rock underneath the rock, and that's more than what I did. But what I did was pretty amazing to me. You go around, and I was just my adrenaline was really running, and I was so high. And I got over this part of the climb, and we got to the top, and just sat there on the grass on the top of the mountain, and looked out over the scene below. The land stretched out for miles and miles and miles. We just sat there glowing in our achievement, and it was really nice. And that was my rock climbing adventure, and I never did it again. So I went on other things. Yale was a generally exciting thing, and I would have enjoyed more, but I just didn't even think of it. I went on other things. So then my sophomore year came, and beginning of the year I met a girl through a friend of mine, and she became my girlfriend, and we started dating. For our first date, we went took a tour of the Harkness Carillon. It's a tower, one of the highest buildings at Yale, and there's it's a Carillon. It's a bell. They ring bells, and they have a concert every day for half an hour in the afternoon. It's really nice, and it's all in pseudo-Gothic or neo-Gothic, whatever you want to call it. And it's a tall spire, and there's this stairwell that goes up, and various stages you go up. And we went on a tour of that for a date, and we hugged and kissed, and there was a little private nook off to the side. And she was really nice. She was brilliant, just a brilliant girl, and she's a successful academic today, married and has kids. So I wish her the best. But we had a love relationship that year, and that was the highlight of the year for me. And having a girlfriend at Yale who was a real Yale is Yale, it was really a thrilling experience. I have fond memories of all of it. I don't want to go into the private details, but I will say that we had a perilous adventure when I found out that she had missed her birth control. She took birth control pills for health reasons. She had a problem with her cycle, and so she had to take them. But we didn't use that. I wasn't going to get into this, but I'm into it. So we didn't generally participate in that, but occasionally we came close, and there was just by some accident that on one occasion when we did get kind of dangerous, and we weren't worried about it because she was taking the pill. She said at dinner, we were at dinner with some friends, she said, oh, by the way, I missed my pill the other day. So afterwards I said to her, you missed your pill, you're in trouble because if you'll recall, we were a little bit active the other night. And so I took her to her gynecologist in town, in New Haven, and they examined her and they found that there was a danger. So she went into the infirmary and took the morning after pill. I fortunately knew about the morning after pill, so I could, I would tell her that she should ask about this. They had a course there at Yale that I took, a non-credit course about human sexuality. It was taught by an expert, and they told us all kinds of things about contraception. So I knew about the morning after pill. And so she took the morning after pill, went to the infirmary, because it was, at that time, it was kind of a new thing, and they didn't know quite what happened, so they wanted to be sure to be able to watch her. I visited her once in the infirmary, took her books to her, and was pretty close to her at that time, could get her through. And of course, she didn't get pregnant, but she was a nice girlfriend, and I said to her once we were in the library, I said, wouldn't it be great wouldn't the kids that we have, if we have kids, wouldn't they be wonderful? Because I really admired her a lot, and of course I had a good opinion of myself. I remember when I said that, she looked up, she looked way into the sky, into the air, she said, and thought. She just thought about it for a few seconds, and I was kind of wondering what she thought about it. But then she said, "Yeah, okay." Well, she admitted that we would have good kids, but it was not a marriage proposal. I never did propose marriage to her, and that may be another thing that I should have done. I should have proposed marriage to her at that point, but I didn't. And she got involved with her philosophy teacher. She was in a tutorial. They were alone together, and she told me that she had this thing going with him, and kind of upset me. And I couldn't tell anybody else about it because she wanted it to remain a secret. And at the end of the school year, she said, "Well, this is very important to me, and you'll have to accept it, or we'll have to cut things off between us." So I said, "Well, I can't accept it, so that's it." So I was destroyed, and she was very sympathetic with me and wanted to show some affection to me, but I got really angry, and I shoved her away, and I said, I didn't shove her, but I just went past her. I didn't want to talk to her. And after that, it was difficult for me because I got depressed, and that is the point of telling the story about this girl. I was so destroyed because I lost her, and I was really fond of her, that I didn't know really what came next. I didn't know. I just it affected. I didn't get clinically depressed, but my optimism dipped quite a bit. So I thought and thought and thought. I realized I needed to do something soon to get out of this. So what I did was that summer between sophomore and junior year, I decided that I would take a trip. Instead of returning to school the next semester, I would go. I had heard that you could take bicycles a long distance, and this just shocked me when I heard about it, that people would travel 100 miles in a day in a bicycle. And of course, because I didn't know that, I can't possibly have known about things like the Tour de France, where they really go far distance. But of course, I found out about it later. But I decided I would go to Europe and buy a bicycle, and I would make a solo bike trip in Europe. And this would be the way that I would attempt to break out of my doldrums over losing my girlfriend. So I took that semester off. I went to Europe. When I arrived there, I realized that I was in jeopardy of the draft, because at that time there was a draft, and I wrote a card to the draft board, and I told them what I was doing. I was supposed to inform them if I took time off from school, because that made me eligible for the draft. As it turned out, they didn't write back. I don't know what they thought about the whole thing. Maybe they didn't even get the card, but I didn't get drafted, fortunately. So But I went first to Stockholm. I bought a bicycle there. I had bought a sleeping bag back in the States. I was shocked when I found out that these bags can take you down to outside conditions of like 20 below zero or something. I don't know, tremendously warm and yet not sweaty. They don't make you sweaty because they breathe. They have modern materials, and so I had a good sleeping bag. I didn't worry about sleeping outside at all, and I had a youth hostel card, but I didn't use it because I found that I could stay outside and be comfortable, so I didn't have to spend any money. I would just bicycle up to a certain point, and the night would come, and I would go off to the side of the road and seclude myself and pull out my sleeping bag and sleep, and then the next day I would be off. So I bought a bike in Stockholm. I went into one bike shop and I tested this bike, and as I was riding down the road in Stockholm on this bike to test it, I was so impressed by this bike because it was a racing bike, and I would just tilt my head just a little bit to the side, one side, the other side, and the bike would go off in that direction. Now maybe I was just making this up, but it just impressed me as being a really sensitive bike, and it was a finely tuned machine. I had never ridden a bike like this before. Of course, it was a 10-speed, and it had good components. It had good materials. It said on the bike, it had Reynolds 531 double butted material, so that was one of the top grades of it was molybdenum manganese steel alloy, very light, very strong, and the tires were unusual. I had to learn about tires. The tires the tubes were sewn up into the tire, and when you had a flat, then they were glued onto the rim. Unusual. There was no clinch. They weren't clinchers where the tires clinched onto the wheel. You rolled off you let the air out. You rolled them off the wheel, and then you cut the seams, and then you pulled out a little length of the tube inside the tire where the hole is, and then you patch it, put it back into the tire, sew it back up. You have a little kit with a needle and thread, and you sew it back up, and then you put it back onto you put glue on the wheel, and you put the tire back on the wheel, and then you pump it up. You have a special pump that pumps very high, and you can put 120 pounds pressure. The bikes I had before this had like 50 pounds pressure max. So this is a very hard tire that made for smooth riding because very little of the tire was actually on the road. You rode on a very small crest, so this made for more efficient riding, so you go faster. And so I learned, because I had a lot of flats, I learned how to fix those, and it was odd. I had an experience of being somehow psychically tuned into the bike, so that I would think for a moment, I think I'm going to have a flat, and within a minute I have a flat. So for some reason I got into this mindset that I was in real close harmony with the bike. And Sweden was magnificent. It was a magnificent country. It was my first exposure to Europe, and it was really exciting. It was farm country mostly where I was, and went down through Sweden. Then I went through Sweden, Denmark, West Germany, because there were two Germanys at the time, Holland, Belgium, and France, with a side trip hitchhiking to Spain, and I bought a guitar. But it was an exciting trip. I don't want to go into much more of the details. But I did get into mountains in southern France. That was an experience also, because they were difficult, and it added to my bicycling experience. Then so this worked. This got me out of my doldrums. It broke me out of my depression over losing my girlfriend, and I returned to school feeling just great. I was a better student because of it, and I was more of a healthy person. I was more. I had been in sports in high school, but this was more of a personal, through and through. My whole being, on a day-to-day basis, was involved in strenuous physical activity, and it just transformed my whole life spirit. It was a spiritual experience, and I think all of my Yale experiences for undergraduate Yale school were of a spiritual nature. I had done the leadership thing in high school. When I got to Yale, I was finished with exploring the possibilities of leadership. What I did at Yale was a matter of spirit. There were things that I did there that I had no idea what I was doing. It was all unknown, and it was all new to me, and it wasn't leadership type of learning. It was definitely something new and unknown, made possible because I had gone through the leadership stage in high school, and I was ready for something new. So the bicycling was definitely that, and I have had experiences since then that have built on that, and it has brought me to the place where I am now, as I'm explaining in these stories about how I became king. And after bicycling in Europe, I returned to school. I did well, and I thought to myself, I'm not through cycling. I have more cycling in me, and I gotta do it. So I took the beginning of the summer between junior and senior years to go out west, and I bicycled back to Chicago. So I started from Seattle, and I had a number of interesting experiences, and bicycled all the way. For the first time, I did more than 100 miles in a day. I did 136, I think was the most I did, in the mountains. So that was pretty good, and in the Rocky Mountains, and they were very high. And I had one experience that was interesting. I was in middle of west somewhere, probably Washington State, I think it was. I'm not sure. Montana, maybe somewhere out there. And I was going through this town, and there was this girl on a horse, and I stopped and I talked to her, I think, a little bit, and she was an interesting girl, and very young, much younger than me. But there were also some kids that I met there, some guys, and there was a group of them. Somehow I got connected with them, and they were interested in my trip and my travels and my stories. So I spent the day with them, and they introduced me to their joys with the outdoors. And I left my bicycle and stuff with one of them in their houses, and we went out on a trip. I don't know how we did this logistically, but we went bare ass swimming in a river. It was a small rivulet, actually. It was not a big river. It was just like a creek, and there was nobody around, so it was wide open spaces, and we would just had a great time. And they said they did this all the time, so they took me on a trip. And one of them didn't get undressed. He had his clothes on, and he had a gun, he had a rifle, and he stood guard. He went down with us. He walked along the string, and he protected us from anybody getting close. So it was an interesting little trip. And then I went on after that, and the experience that I had when I ended that trip, riding into town, my hometown near Glen Ellen, was unique. After traveling 1,800 miles, and then just on my own, under my own power, coming into my hometown, and then recognizing the landmarks that I knew in my hometown, was such a trip. It was just like pulling in all my life story to that point. Well, I was very young, but still pretty young, and coming into my hometown, seeing all these things, it just tied everything up. Everything made sense, and I walked into my house. My mother was there. My brother and sisters were there, and I said, "Mom, I'm home," and she looked at me, and she couldn't relate to it. She just said, to her, there was no change. I was the same guy. I was, Jim. Oh yeah, you're home. Okay, so your supper is ready or something like that. But I was transformed. I was a new person, and she didn't recognize it. So I was definitely on my own, and after that, I have strayed from my relatives a great deal. And my brother and I have patched up, but it definitely created a distancing between me and my family, because I was just beyond them. I was just way over the top. And it has really led to great things. So that was the summer. Took me a few weeks to do that, and then I returned to Yale my senior year, and I was studying one day my senior year, and I decided to take a break. I was in the library, one of the libraries at Yale, and I decided to take a break. I walked down the row of shelves of books, and I went a random distance down the aisle. I turned into a random aisle, random stacks of books, and I went down a random amount of space. I went to a random shelf on this one side of the space, and I went to a random book on the shelf. Just picked up a book at random, and I looked at it. It was a book I had never seen before. Obviously, I mean, what are the chances you see a book unless you're really well educated? And at that point, it wasn't. I'm still not. But I opened this book, and the name of it was the I Ching. It was a Chinese book. It wasn't in Chinese. It was in English. It was a translation. But the name of the book was the I Ching. It described how you use the book. You pick out a random text. There are 64 of these texts. They're organized in order, 64 of them. And you use coins or some various methods of use of picking one out at random. And that's the one that is it's counsel, it's advice, written thousands of years ago by ancient Chinese people, great sages in the history of China. And they've written this book, and you pick one out by random, and it contains advice for this. They call them times. It's a certain, the 64 are all possible states of the individual in society, and each one gives counsel based on what that particular time is composed of. And it's just as applicable today as it was thousands of years ago. And many people use it. Some people are addicted to it. They can't go 5 minutes without consulting the I Ching, but in my case, I don't use it that often. I use it for more special occasions. And I realized that the way that I found this book, without anybody telling me how about the book, no one told me about the book. I picked it out randomly. I had no counselors at that point. The book was exactly the kind of process that I used to find the book. I found it by random processes that led me to the book. And then the book described how you use the book by random processes to pick a part of the book to apply to your life. And I have since used it every so often, and it has been really remarkable the way that it teaches you about a lot of aspects of life that we don't talk about too much in Western civilization. It's an Eastern philosophy related to a religion called Taoism. It's related to it. And that was another key part of my Yale education. I decided at some point in my education there are two things. One, to major in economics, but then I decided later that I wanted, instead of to do economics, that I would become an architect. which has never happened. But that's the decision I made, and when I left Yale, I was going along that direction to become an architect. And that will be the beginning of the next episode that I'll be describing.